Hold up. Yeah.
Welcome to the Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Krier. Join us as Deb talks with her guests, experts in their fields, as they share real-life stories and techniques to power up your business.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Krier, and I am passionate about showing professionals the tools that they can use to make themselves and their businesses the most successful that they can. And we're going to have a ton of fun today and learn a lot because it's a subject that I've never talked about. So that's what makes this fun, because I love it when I get to talk to guests where I get to learn from them. And it really is a topic we've never covered before. We've talked about how to start a business. We've talked about marketing tools. We've obviously talked about social media, but we're going to talk about how to not spend a ton of money and buy an existing business and then make it successful. So please join me in welcoming an expert in this, Konstantin Kapothanasis.
Thanks, Deb.
Well, I said your name right. I'm just so thrilled. Fortunately for me, you go by Costa. So, but let me tell folks just a little bit about you.
Sure.
So Costa owns several businesses now, but he started off in finance. He has an MBA and a Master of Science in Finance and a BA in Economy. He sold the story that we go to college, get a good job, and live the dream. And it didn't work out for him. He's worked in multiple places, done multiple things, professional athlete, all sorts of stuff, but latched onto the idea of how to really buy an existing business without a lot of money down. And to that end, he's actually written a book, and we can find it on Amazon. It's called The Zero Down Business, A Guide to Buying an Existing Business with Little to No Money. So again, Costa, welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you giving me the chance to share my story.
Great. And, I do have to say you're a youngster, but it's actually very impressive because you have done all of this and you're just 27 years old. So, I love that. I love that, because so many people are like, ew, millennials, they don't have any ambition. They don't know how to, well, holy cow, you have proved all of that wrong because you absolutely are a success story.
I think it's kind of cliche because when you're an entrepreneur, you kind of like have no other gear.
Right. Right. And so like I said, you had a variety of different positions and jobs that you did. I love the fact that in your book you talk about that you weren't really good at math, but you ended up in finance. How did that happen?
That happened by accident, really. I ended up at a bank. Well, I graduated in 2010 when the job market was pretty scarce.
Right.
And I had trouble getting interviews at places like Toys R Us. Like it was tough.
Right.
I'm from Maine originally, but I moved to Maryland for college, and coincidentally, the bank manager of a local branch was from my hometown. And if you know anything about Maine, it's a very close-knit community. So she did me a favor and brought me on, and that's kind of where my interest in finance took over.
Okay. Well, and it's one of those things where you have a passion for doing this, but you did just kind of fall into it. And that's what I love, and because you are truly a success story. So let's talk about what you have done. It was funny. I was telling you off the air that I was recently at a networking meeting, and it was all entrepreneurs, and we had all started our business from the ground up. So we were talking about the challenges that you face with that. You have to get a business license. You have to decide if you're an LLC. You have to, where are you going to operate from? All these various things. But you have this concept, and again, it's been very successful, of buying an existing business. And, we hear about people who buy into a franchise. I mean, clearly that's what happens with McDonald's, with, all of the, any franchise that's out there, whether it's a restaurant or the variety of things. You buy into that franchise, but you actually buy businesses. So how did you decide to even do this?
So it came about kind of by happenstance because after I hurt my shoulder and had to stop playing baseball for a living and go out into the real world.
Mm-hmm.
I had a connection. I had lost a connection with baseball, so I had started a business from the ground up, but it was
Okay.
a hobby business.
Mm-hmm.
It was a company called Maine Bat Company, which was a custom baseball bat company,
Okay.
where I hand turned on a lathe baseball
Wow.
bats.
Mm-hmm.
But I was still maintaining a full-time job,
Mm-hmm.
and when I got higher and higher up in finance, and it took more and more of my time, I actually had to. I went to go sell the business because I just didn't have the time for it,
Mm-hmm.
unless I was going to be up until 2, 3 in the morning. And so I came across this website, which I talk about at length in the book, bizbuysell.com. And
Mm-hmm.
BizBuySell is basically the marketplace, the go-to marketplace for businesses for sale.
Right.
I found out pretty early on that I wasn't really meant to be a W-2 employee. I struggled with large bureaucracies, and finance is
Mm-hmm.
probably the worst place for large bureaucracies. Everything's slow moving, change is very slow, and it's very difficult to make an impact. So, that being said, I felt like I needed a business. So I started looking for businesses that were for sale,
Mm-hmm.
that weren't that much money. That was how I started off. And it
Mm-hmm.
was through that website Biz Buy Sell where I started the process of
Mm-hmm.
looking for existing businesses that were for sale. And the way that the website works is you request the books, you sign non-disclosure agreements because there's personal information obviously in the purchase of a business.
Right.
And all I did was I found an industry that I thought I was going to be successful in through my own personal skills, and then I just requested the books on almost every single one in that industry that was for
Mm-hmm.
sale, and just studied the P&L. I studied the businesses, saw which ones were doing well, which ones were doing poor, kind of got a feel for why people were selling their businesses.
Okay.
And then from there, I pulled the trigger. I said, okay, I'm going to go after this one. Um, I thought it was a good situation where I could keep my job for a little bit and then transition into
Mm-hmm.
full-time self-employment. Um, but uh, but yeah, that's how the process started.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and it's, when you were talking, one of the things that struck me was that, you decided to sell the bat company because so many people, they just say, well, I'm not going to do this anymore. And so they just close the doors, whether it's, real doors or, fictional doors. And you decided, hey, might as well see if I can make some money off of this. But obviously that's why people sell businesses because, for whatever reason, they decide they're not going to do it anymore, but they don't want to close those doors. And and really, I mean, this is just fascinating to me because this concept had never entered my mind, and I won't tell you how old I am, but I've been in business a long time. And the fact that people would think, hey, this is a great business, I don't want to do it anymore, but let's see what I can get from it.
You just touched on a key premise. There's and I go into this in the book as well. And just statistically speaking, the largest amount of first generation business owners who have no one to take over are starting to
Mm-hmm.
retire. So there's
Right.
never been more of an opportunity to negotiate the takeover of a business
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes move in without even needing to spend any money at all to take that business over, just because there are people out there that, like you said, they'll just walk away. Well, if
Right.
you can spot people in that position that are willing to just walk away, then there's no reason that they can't just hand over the reins, other than
Mm-hmm.
the only logical one that I personally see is if someone's built something to their own standard and they don't want to see someone uh,
Right.
eliminate the standard that they held. But
Mm-hmm.
that's such a small minority of niche businesses. There's so many businesses out there that are closing down. I read the newspaper. Well, not the newspaper anymore. I get the local newspaper on my Facebook feed. Um,
Right.
and there's local favorites closing down all the time, and I always
Mm-hmm.
ask myself why. Someone's got to be willing to. And the comment section's always the same. I love that place. I love that place.
Right.
Why
Why
are
are
they
you closing?
exactly?
Mhm. Right. And so, say you've decided you want to buy this business and you talked about the information that they have to provide. Obviously, they have to somehow verify that they're not lying. And so full disclosure, all that good stuff. So they tell you and that why they want to close their business, and obviously they provide financials and things like that.
Sometimes. I've done this enough
Ah,
now where I've seen a lot of different situations,
okay.
and a lot of it is actually acquiring like a feel for the people you're dealing with. I got very lucky. The first business I bought, um, my first store in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, I the the owners of the business used a broker, and the broker was very professional, and he
Okay.
put together a full packet, like a 26-page packet with an executive
Wow.
summary,
Mm-hmm.
P&L, expenses, the works, um, areas of weakness, areas of strength. Like it
Mm-hmm.
was very nice, and
Mm-hmm.
um, and so that worked out. That might have just been luck, but the along the line, I purchased a convenience store type business. It was a vape shop, the e-liquids when that fad was
Mm-hmm.
going on,
Right.
and I bought that over a napkin at a bar in downtown Baltimore.
I love it. So you just looked at them and you had a good chat and you got a good feel that this would be a good business to buy.
Yeah, that was and the situation called for it. The just to give some context for that particular situation, the vape shops are obviously a trend that's going on
Right.
currently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so the margins on that business are fantastic. The guys that I bought that location from had opened up four other locations,
Ah,
and they had the long-term goal of opening a bar in downtown Baltimore. So they didn't really have a passion for vaping
okay.
or convenience stores or anything like that. They were just trying to find an ends to a means. So that one was more just asking people questions and
Mm-hmm.
getting a feel for their personalities. And it made sense. There's sometimes when you're talking to someone that's selling their business and it doesn't make sense. And then
Right.
you want to get like audited numbers at that point. But
Mm-hmm.
with these guys, like it made sense that they were trying to unload this business
Mm-hmm.
for cheap because they wanted to open their bar.
Right. So when you take over a business, is it just you get everything? So, like on Monday it's owned by Bob and on Tuesday it's owned by Costa?
Pretty much. It and that can depend as well. If it's very formally done, there's usually an installment note, or some kind, depending on the financing structure,
Okay.
and there will be Exhibit A at the end
Mm-hmm.
of the note, and it will list all the items um that are coming with the business. If it's a straight
Mm-hmm.
asset purchase sale, then it's basically everything that's inside the business. There's usually
Okay.
two separate documents unless you're buying the real estate, which up to this point I haven't bought any of the real estate because I've been doing this with no money. So I don't have
Right.
the down payment on some of these
Mm-hmm.
$300,000 $400,000 pieces of real estate. So you execute a brand new lease with whoever the owner of the building is, and then
Mm-hmm.
the installment note will lay out the terms of the actual business purchase agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have never bought equity in a business, so I've never taken over an existing entity because that can be risky. Because if you can't uncover all the liens that entity has, you could
Right.
inherit some bad contracts. But
Mm-hmm.
so usually it's in the form of an asset purchase agreement.
Okay. What about the employees? Do they and obviously it's going to vary with every single one, but do you typically have the ability to keep the employees?
Yeah, so it's always a difficult time of transition for them because it's a lot of confusion. Usually,
Right.
the owners don't tell the employees that the business is for sale, so they kind of get blindsided.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And like I said, Bob's their boss one day and Costa's their boss the next day.
right, exactly. Now, for me, I have been very fortunate that I've inherited good management at pretty
Mm-hmm.
much all of the businesses that I've opened, and so I have never not taken on all of the employees.
Okay.
I've had employees leave because of the change in ownership. It was
Right.
just because they got spooked, but I have always given the employees the opportunity to stay and keep their hours and their pay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so typically how it works. Then again, my situation, I've never walked into a store and been operational. I've
Right.
always been managerial from the outside. So
Mhm.
if you're reading my book and you're looking to if you're reading my book and you're looking to be self-employed and you need to eliminate that $40,000 manager so you can pay yourself that $40,000 to live your life, well then that's a little bit different than
Mhm.
my approach.
Right. Well, and that would be if you were just buying one business. You have purchased multiple businesses, so you have to rely on the fact that it's going to continue to run itself.
Correct.
So, this just baffles me. I mean, it's such a cool subject, and that's why I really wanted to talk to you about it, because it is something where you can do this, as you say, with little or no money down. So, talk about that, because that's of course why people don't typically buy a franchise, because there's a lot of money down, all sorts of things, and
Royalties.
yeah, all those things, and you're just going in and buying a business. So how do you do it with zero money down?
So the most common, and I talk about this in the book because there's several ways, and I've
Right.
done a bunch of them, but the
Mm-hmm.
most common way is seller financing. And the nice thing about seller financing is if the business owner is willing to do seller financing, they have trust in their business that they're going to be
Right.
paid.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're saying no, 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 go out and get an SBA loan, or no, 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 go out and get third party financing, they're saying they want their money up front because they're not sure you're going to be able to pay them.
Right. And it's going to be a bunch of money,
Right, and
typically.
there's gonna be down payments involved.
Mm-hmm.
In seller financing, that's all how good you are at negotiating.
Mm-hmm.
So, because you're dealing one on one with another competent human who is able to make
Mm-hmm.
decisions on their own. So with the first store, I used a cash advance method.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what I did, because I had worked W-2 jobs for so long, I had a
Mm-hmm.
car, I had pretty good credit.
Right.
Um, and so what I did was in the same night I took out, and I'm not advising anyone do this, but
I know. I got to this
I
part in your
took
book
out
and I went,
10 credit cards on the same night, and I opened about $80,000 worth of open credit in one
mm-hmm.
night. And I used PayPal, and I in the book I took screenshots of all the transactions because
Uh-huh.
some people don't believe it, but
Right.
I cash advanced myself $10,000. 5,000 of it went to startup costs to kind of implement some of the changes I wanted to make when I took over the business, and 5,000 of it went to the landlord slash business owner in the form
Mm-hmm.
of security deposit slash down payment.
Right. So you bought a business for $10,000, pretty much.
Yeah, that was the upfront cost.
Wow. And clearly it was, you'd done your research, you knew that this was going to be a good entity, otherwise you wouldn't have wasted your money. How do you, what's the typical process? You've kind of focused on certain industries, and, which is obviously a benefit. You're not just going, oh, let's buy this, oh, let's buy that. So you focused on certain things and obviously done your research, but it just, I'm not even sure what to ask, because this is just it is such an interesting subject to me. So you buy this first business and it works. So how does that process, it was successful. So, you know, how long until you decided, hey, I want to do this again?
Almost immediately. It was almost immediate that I was looking
Mm-hmm.
for the second one. And to this day I put aside 1 hour a day to go on Biz Buy Sell and some of the other broker websites and even Craigslist sometimes to see if there's anything for sale, because there's no harm in requesting the
Right.
books.
Mm-hmm.
Because as long as you're an ethical person and you sign the NDA and you're not planning on doing anything nefarious
Right.
with that information, like
Mm-hmm.
if there's no harm in doing it. So I'm always looking. My second location I got for $0, period. Zero.
Mm-hmm.
No $10,000. It was zero. But
How did you do
but
that?
so I using Biz Buy Sell once again, and this one's
Mm-hmm.
more of a story that this is probably pure luck, but
Mm-hmm.
using Biz Buy Sell, that 20 minutes away from my first location, which is another
Mm-hmm.
stroke of luck.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a Quick Lube was for sale, which is my business is the Quick Lube industry. It's kind of like a Jiffy Lube, except for we're
Right.
better.
Mm-hmm.
And so the owner was using a broker, and I had tried negotiating with her for a year, almost a year straight. And I actually, in the book, I have all our emails between each other because it was a very frustrating process.
Mm-hmm.
But the owner was trying to move to Belize, so he was trying to move out of country.
Okay.
And this is where
so he had big incentive.
Exactly. And this is where being intuitive and just like understanding leverage is super important in this process, because once you find that piece of leverage and you just apply pressure to that leverage, then everything comes to your feet. So I had offered him seller financing. I actually, at this point from my business, had $30,000 in cash, and I offered him $30,000 in cash along with seller financing. I offered him all this stuff. And at the end of the day, he just wanted to move to Belize. And so he sold the real estate to a young guy that had his own real estate company, and he was trying to get into the commercial into commercial leasing, and he wanted to turn the building into a Taco Bell. And so when I found this out, I basically went to work on research, like what it would take to turn a Quick Lube into Taco Bell. You deal with so much oil, it couldn't be cheap.
Right.
So the building sat there at this point, sat there. And I pulled the mortgage from the local county courthouse to see what this realtor was paying on it. And that goes back to finding leverage. Like when you know these things, you have leverage when you negotiate. So I know what he's paying. I know he can't do this forever. He can't keep sitting on these payments forever. He's not making any money. And then when I was able to reach out to someone representing Yum Brands, which is Taco Bell's holding company, they said they had no plans of turning that location because of the Department of Environmental Protection.
Right. It was just going to be so much paperwork and so much upfront cost that they just couldn't do it.
Right. And there was some other things that went into it location-wise and that stuff. But at the end of the day, what it came down to was that place was going to remain a Quick Lube. And so the realtor didn't really know anything about that industry. So he reached out to the previous owner's broker, who passed on the information of everyone who inquired about buying the business. And he reached out to me, and he wanted a incredibly high lease for the square footage of the building. And
and you'd done your research.
And I knew what his mortgage payment was, so I put my offer on the table. And he initially rejected it, but I stood firm with it because I knew the situation.
Right.
And almost a week and a half later, he gave me a call and said, "When do you want to come in and sign the lease?"
Right.
And then this is where I actually got really lucky. The previous owner left all the equipment behind.
Oh, okay.
So
he just closed the door and left.
He closed doors and he moved to Belize. I asked the realtor, I said, are you planning on liquidating this stuff? Like, what's the plan? He has no idea what the industry. It's a niche industry. It's not something that you can put on eBay and like sell some of that machinery.
Right.
So I said, let me do, I'm familiar with this industry. Let me do some of the legwork for you. I'll give you a cut of some of this machinery if you let me have some of the essentials, which is like my tanks that hold the oil and the guns that put the oil into the engine. And so, and that's how I was able to get that location with literally no money. All I did was sign the lease and took over.
Right. Well, clearly what you do is you research, and you're very good at it. So where else should people be researching when they're thinking of buying a business, an existing business?
It all really starts with Biz Buy Sell. You can go to eBay, you can go to Craigslist. I list some other websites in the book that have the businesses for sale, but Biz Buy Sell has a very streamlined process of you see what's available. It gives you a summary, so like gross revenue, cash flow.
Okay.
So you could take a look at whatever it is you're looking for, and then you just send a request to whoever's listing it. Most of the time it's a broker, sometimes it's the actual owner of the business.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll reach out to you and then do whatever process they need to do in order to get the information in front of your face. And at that point, you want to go check out the business. You want to adhere to any kind of rules they have. Most of the time they say don't approach the employees. Feel free to pretend to be a customer if you want to get a feel for
Right.
the business. But it's every single location I've bought from my Quick Lube, I've gone at some point and sat in the parking lot and just watched it for 4 or 5 hours.
Cool. Well, so I'm on Biz Buy Sell right now, and it brought up Georgia. It knew where I was, and so it said the top categories right now in Georgia are seller financed, dry cleaners, real estate for sale or lease, restaurants, liquor stores, hotels, motels, convenience stores, barber beauty salons, vending machines, gas stations, bars, or work from home. So, and those are just the top things. So, there really is a lot of opportunity out there.
Yeah, and you don't want to fall into the trap of just pressing the sort by least amount, because that's what I did at first. And there's typically a reason someone's trying to sell a business for $10,000.
Right. There's a problem.
Yeah. You can't be afraid to look at the businesses that are for sale for $500,000. Just because it's listed for $500,000 doesn't mean that you necessarily need $500,000 to buy it. In my case, the first location was listed for $175,000. I did negotiate the seller financing aspect down, because at the end of the day, you do need to be able to pay off the seller held note from the revenue in the business. And then depending on what your situation is, and still be able to pay yourself. And so you do need to have that kind of buffer. So you can't just say, I'll give you $500,000 in seller financing, because if that note comes to be more than what your revenue is, you're putting yourself out of business before you even start. But but it also doesn't mean you should eliminate those businesses that have that high price tag. The ones that are like 50,000 and below are usually just like fire sales. They're just trying to get rid of their equipment.
And so it could be somebody passed away, or whatever. They want to liquidate as fast as they can.
Yeah, they're just trying to get out. And sometimes, and you have to also be wary of industry, barbershops, convenience stores, cash heavy businesses.
Right.
You can't always trust their books, because you don't know.
Right. And we're not saying that they're being deceptive, but certainly in cash businesses, not all the revenue's reported. Let's just put it that way. And I mean, that's just the way things are. And so so they might say, hey, they bring in 10,000 a week when they actually are bringing in 25.
Right, and then they're trying to sell it at a $25,000 valuation and you're only looking at 10,000, and they want to stick to that 25, but they have no way of proving it. So that's also can in the reverse, it can also be leverage.
Right. Well, and that's where, maybe doing your due diligence in advance is definitely, a benefit. You've sat there, you've watched it, you've gone in, you've pretended to be a customer, a client, and you see the turnaround. So you're like, yeah, they're not doing 10 grand. They're doing a heck of a lot more than that. Because you saw that. Or the converse is true. They're overvaluing it, and you're like, yeah, I sat here for 4 hours and you didn't have a single customer.
Yeah. And anecdotally speaking, just like a lot of these industries, barbershops, retail facing environments, sometimes it's as simple as going to Yelp, and you can you can save yourself trouble just by going to Yelp, because unless you have the utmost confidence in yourself to turn a business around, if there are some businesses that are so deep in the hole, it's tough to turn them around.
Right. Well, and you should always look at customer reviews. If it's been one of those places that is consistently getting 5-star reviews, that's going to be a better business to buy than, and especially if you're not experienced in it, than the business that needs to be turned around. I always like the places that are advertising under new management. And I'm like, yeah, right. That means they were having trouble, wasn't it?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so they're trying to say, hey, those people who weren't good customer service, weren't good managers, weren't whatever, they're not here anymore. So come try us again.
Yeah, and it's and that's important. I've had to deal with that twice now, where my whole marketing campaign has been new ownership, new management, just to put out previous fires. Actually, I was dealing with something along those lines right before our phone call. It's funny because when people ask me, what do you do for a living? It used to be so easy. I'm a financial analyst. I'm a this, I'm a that. Now it's like, it's tough to describe because there are days where all I'm doing is putting out fires. So and then there are days where, I'm just being Mr. HR, and then there are days where I'm sourcing new business. And so, entrepreneur gets thrown around very easily these days.
Right.
And so I think to my core, I think that's what I am, but it's just, I don't have a clear definition, to nail down yet.
Right. Just out of curiosity, how many businesses currently do you own?
5.
Okay. And have you've talked about some that you had and you sold. So how many kind of, since you started doing this, have you bought and sold or still retain?
Total, 7.
Okay. Cool. And so, I mean, that goes to show that this, maybe it is somebody who just wants to get into business. They want to buy, the beauty salon around the corner, and that's going to be what they do forever. But you've made it a business to buy and sell businesses.
Yeah, and at first, after the whole Belize situation, I thought that was just luck. And then after the third one, I was like, this is an acquired skill. This is not, I've done it now 3 times, and now I've done it 5, 6, 7, 8 times. Like it's not luck. That means, and if it's not luck, that means other people can do it. And it's completely changed my life. I had no intention of writing this book, but I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and a friend of mine who publishes books for a living, he approached me about just getting that story out. And I'm like, you know what? I'm so grateful that I was able to do this, because my quality of life has just been off the charts since I've done this. I want to be able to share this with people.
Well, and like you said, if in a lot of cases, this is not costing a small fortune. In many cases, it's very, very reasonable.
Yeah. I think the most I've spent, I recently purchased a location in Chicago, and I think my out-of-pocket expenses were about $12,000, and that's the most.
Cool. Now, you've done this enough times to know the whole process. Do you have a lawyer that looks over things, or looks over the napkin that you wrote on? What is that process? Because people are thinking, well, yeah, right, it doesn't cost anything, but then it gets so detail oriented that we don't know how to do it.
No. The short answer is no. I don't have a lawyer. I mean, I have a business lawyer for business related stuff, but when it comes to purchasing the business, it's funny. I have a partner on a location I just bought in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he's a corporate attorney. And when we were sitting down with the broker, we're sitting at the table hammering out the terms of the asset purchase agreement, and the lawyer totally just like dismissed me at the table and was like going straight to him. Oh, you're an attorney. What do you think about this? And
he didn't know.
No, it's not that he didn't know. He deferred to me. He's like, what do you think? Right. And it's funny because these are not difficult contracts. Like I should probably upload. I can probably upload a couple of them into PDF format and just like make sure there's no personal information on them, and you can see for yourself like how simple these asset purchase agreements are, because what it comes down to is you're buying intangible assets and physical assets, and you're promising to make payments on a specific day for those assets, and those assets are have a lien on them, so that they revert back to the original owner if you somehow can't make those payments.
Okay. Well, and at the start of the program, we were talking about the fact that a lot of entrepreneurs start a business. And so they're thinking, hey, I could be a landscaper. I could be, I could own a restaurant. I could do all of these various things. And again, I mean, how many times could they have bought an existing business and skipped a whole bunch of that painful stuff that we all face when we initially start a business?
Yeah, and if they're willing, and this is an X factor as well, you got to be willing to either relocate. You need to go where the situation takes you. I was
Right.
fortunate that my first one was only an hour and 20 minutes away, and a lot of people wouldn't do that. Like a lot of
Hmm.
people wouldn't want to drive an hour and 20 minutes one way to do what I did.
Right.
But
But you weren't on site every day.
no, not at first.
Hmm.
There was a short period where I was, but at the end of the day, to live the life that you want to live, you have to do the things that you have to do. And
Hmm.
so, like when I bought the Chicago store, I live in Baltimore, so
Right.
I signed up for Spirit's $9 fare club, and it's a $44 round trip flight to go to Chicago.
Oh.
I go almost probably in the first 3 months, I probably went once a week, but
Hmm.
like if someone came up to you and said you can have an extra $100,000 worth of income if you just spend $1,500 worth of flights, I think
That's a pretty good
most people would
deal.
say that's
Right.
fine.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, and you probably go out and back in the same day, and
exactly.
yeah.
That's exactly it. I leave at 5 in the morning. I come back 9 at
Hmm.
night.
Right.
So I'm never there more, except for in the beginning when we were going through the
Right. Hmm.
negotiation process. I
Hmm.
stayed for a few days, but I'm never there for
Hmm.
more than one day.
Hmm. Well, but that is something to consider when you're doing your due diligence is, do you have to be there, on site? And obviously it depends on why you're buying the business. But, do you have to be on site, and can you get there easily? Getting from Baltimore to Chicago is pretty easy. Now you could probably do Baltimore to Atlanta fairly easily. But you start going further west, and you've got time differences, all those various things. So it's not a day trip, it's a 2-day trip, and all those various things. So that's definitely something that somebody needs to consider when they're thinking of doing this.
Yeah, and it all depends on your personal situation because if you're just searching to buy a business so you can be full-time self-employed and get the boss off your back, then you need to be willing to relocate. If
Right.
that means if your intentions are being the manager, operator, owner operator, being active in the store, you need to be willing to relocate.
Hmm.
If you're not willing to do that, then either it's not for you or you need to accept the situation as it is.
Right. Well, and that means, again, that you've got to have really good people that are there already that you trust.
Oh yeah, and that's probably the most difficult part. And at the same time, thanks to technology, obviously, a $200 security system from BJ's or Costco's or Sam's Club, and you can interact with your employees,
Right.
on the spot. You can see what's going in. I can log into my cell phone and look at any one of my stores at any given time and see
Hmm.
what's going on. And everything now is you're able to communicate like this interview we're doing right now.
Right, right. And that's the other thing that people need to keep in mind is, yeah, they can put a security camera in where they're getting a live feed, and all those various things, and whether the employees know it or not, that's kind of between you and the employees. But it's so it doesn't have to be, gee, I'm going to drive to this business every single day. There's certainly lots of ways to keep tabs on it.
Yes, that's right. And in my opinion, the security is just as much there for the employees as it is for you as well, because um, you need
Right.
to have their back at all times. And I'm in a high liability industry.
Hmm.
We're dealing with people's vehicles, which
Right.
are very personal to a lot of people. So you want to make sure that if someone makes an accusation and your employee tells you, no, that's not how it happened, you have their back as well, because that's people managing is very important in the way that I have my business structured because if my guys don't
Hmm.
trust me then it's all going to fall apart
Right.
because of the inability to be on site to
Hmm.
be reassuring.
Right. Well, and like you said, it's a security feature, so it's not just that you're checking on them, it's that, it's a recorded thing, so that if somebody comes back later and says, "Oh, you damaged my car," or whatever, you're like, "No, no, we have the video feed. We can show you that we didn't do that."
Yeah, exactly.
So, more than likely, obviously depends on the business. A lot of that's already there that you're purchasing.
Sometimes I actually only one of the stores I've taken over has had a security system
Oh.
already installed
Hmm.
and that one was and that one's the Pittsburgh store, and I need to fix it because right now you can only access it if you're on the wireless network at the store, which
Oops.
doesn't make sense.
No, that doesn't, and well, and I'm kind of assuming that some of the businesses you bought, the owner that you bought it from might have been on site, and so it, having security wasn't as big a deal. But it's just a way to cover everybody and to protect them.
Yeah, and it's just as much as protection for me as it is for the employees as it is security for
Mm-hmm.
my assets.
Right.
I have such good management in place that they handle so much stuff, and I'm very grateful for that because I know
Mm-hmm.
that's not always the case.
Right. Yeah, because we mentioned the fact that sometimes the employees leave because it's very disheartening to them. It's there might have been problems. I mean, clearly sometimes there are if somebody's trying to sell a business, and so it might be the employees that were the problems. And so it's really good to make sure that you've got great people in place, or if not, they go.
Yes, that's right. And that has been the case multiple times where you've had to take care of someone who was part of the reason why the business was probably for
Hmm.
sale to begin with.
Right. Well, and then you just have situations where it's not a good fit. And but I would imagine a lot of times, especially because sometimes the business, you mentioned the fact that a lot of times the business is sold without the employees knowing. I mean, there can be an awful lot of resentment there. Not the least of which would be some of them would think, well, why wasn't I given the opportunity to either buy it or buy in, or all of these various things? Didn't you trust us? All yada yada yada.
And that's a great point, and it's funny you bring that up because that I have experienced that very thing where the employees were upset that the owner didn't give them the opportunity to take over the business. Um, I've also run into issues where I've taken over a business and the employees weren't happy with my age, and
Right.
it's
We mentioned the fact that you're in your late 20s. Somebody who's either been in the business or been employed there, they in a lot of cases just naturally don't trust somebody who's younger.
right, and that's why it's important. Like transparency is important, and
Right.
also skill is important as well
Mhm.
because when I took over the first location, it was in pretty much a revenue free fall. And their
Mhm.
way of combating the squeeze in revenue was to get better margin, which is not my favorite approach because that means you're usually cutting discretionary things that are helpful to the business.
Right.
And it took me less than 16 months to have an increase of over $100,000 in revenue,
Mhm.
and that's kind of credibility. Just it speaks for itself. And then when the employees believe in your vision and they believe in your ability to turn it around, and I've just
Mhm.
taken that with me to each store,
Right.
and it's a snowball effect. But I can't say that it wasn't difficult in the beginning to
Mhm.
earn that trust.
Right. Well, and especially if you're not there every single day, it gets real hard. And no matter what the business is, if the manager isn't or the owner isn't there, it's easy to slack off. It's easy, to there's all sorts of things. So developing that trust factor with them where they're thinking, hey, we want this business to succeed, so we're going to do the best we can. That can be difficult.
It definitely can be. And fortunately, this most recent acquisition, my Pittsburgh store, had the opposite effect where they were so glad to have someone that cared that they've been putting in 10x effort because they're just happy that someone's taken over. And their owner was there more
Mm-hmm.
recently. So physical presence doesn't always mean emotional presence. And
Mm-hmm.
so, as long as you're communicating with your staff and making it known that you're putting in the effort, um,
Right. And that they can reach you if they need to, all of those various things.
that's exactly right. I right before you called me, um, one of the situations I was dealing with, one of my employees wasn't able to log into the system we use for clocking in and out, and he wanted to run his report. And he goes, "If I'm bothering you, I'm sorry." And I replied, I said, no, never. Like, if you
Right.
ever need anything, reach out to
Mm-hmm.
me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just what you have to do until you get to the point where you have an HR department or an
Right.
executive assistant.
Mm-hmm. Well, have you ever had the situation or heard of one where the former owner stays on in some capacity?
Typically, you negotiate that into the agreement where they'll stay on for a certain amount of hours to train you on machinery.
Oh, okay.
Because if it's something you're not familiar with, you don't want to, especially if it's heavy equipment, you don't want to, or even something as simple as like a pizza oven. Like, if you
Mm-hmm.
don't know the intricacies of the equipment, then you could end up doing damage. So I have I have done that before. Um, and it's helpful. I don't really need to anymore because I'm so familiar with the industry at this point that there's not
Right.
much that
Mm-hmm.
um, that I'm not familiar with. But
Right.
that's definitely something you can negotiate into. So if it's an industry that you're not familiar with, you can definitely leverage that into your deal so that you can get trained on it before you just take the reins.
Okay. Well, and we mentioned that you have chosen one specific type of industry, and that is what has really helped is, you learned at the start and now you can just kind of go from there.
Yes, and I made a lot of mistakes, but it gets so much easier after the first one
Mm-hmm.
because from there, especially once you're able to get into an industry and you have the connections,
Mm-hmm.
that's such a huge part of it as well.
Right. Now, one of the things that you have done, and I'm assuming this is because you own multiple businesses, you've set up a holding company. So, what is a holding company and what are the benefits of that?
So, a few of my businesses are under the holding company, which is my way of keeping everything under one umbrella. I originally did it to save money because
Okay.
if you do separate entities, you need to do separate QuickBooks accounts, you need to do separate accounting fees, you need to do separate basically everything. And so, if you have a $50 a month payment for whatever, and then you multiply it times three, it can get up there in cost, especially if
Right.
you're setting up a seller financing situation or any kind of financing situation where you're cutting it close in order to take over the business in terms of revenue to expenditures. So my holding company owns three of the locations, and all of the money funnels to the operating account, and we have a payroll account that the money gets distributed to when it comes time for payroll, and then all expenses are paid out of the operating account. And this gives you leverage in the sense that bulk orders of anything. So
Mm-hmm.
no
Ah.
matter what industry you're in, you're gonna have bulk orders of something. And for
Mm-hmm.
me, it's oil and oil filters, and those are my two biggest purchases. But by having it under one entity, then those purchases, instead of being three $1,000 purchases, it's one $3,000 purchase, and depending on the price breaks of whatever you're
It might
buying.
be a $2,000 purchase.
Right, exactly, and you can get better margin when you leverage it like that.
Mm-hmm. You know, we've got about 10 minutes left, and so let's talk some more. I'm looking at your book. You talk about some of the mistakes that you made, and one of them is that you fell in love with the business. So why is that a mistake? Because don't you want to love your business?
When I speak of falling in love with the business, I speak of falling in love with the acquisition of the business. So you don't quite own it yet,
Ah.
because that will cloud your judgment in terms of, and I talk about that with the Ameriloop. That's the name of my business, and that I took over with no money.
Mm-hmm.
In the Ameriloop situation, I had offered the guy $35,000
Mm-hmm.
with seller financing only because I was just so infatuated with that location, and I just
Right.
wanted it so badly. And obvious,
So it almost became a negative, or it gave him leverage.
if they can get a whiff of how much you want it, it can definitely become leverage. But I ended up getting the place for $0, and
Mm-hmm.
that just came from being patient. And so you never want to fall in love with an acquisition, because then you're unable to then you start justifying things that you shouldn't be justifying, and you
Mm-hmm.
start placing a higher value on intangible assets. And it's kind of why people never really value their house correctly when they go to sell it, because they're
Right.
putting an emotional valuation on it that the person who's
Mm-hmm.
buying your house doesn't really see.
Right. Well, and yeah, they're saying, this is where I raised my family, you know, and and we've put so much into it, and all these things, and he's like, I'm gonna have to gut it, and
Right.
you're like, oh no.
Exactly. You look past the flaws that other people
Mhm.
spot pretty easily.
Right. Well, and that's where it helps to have kind of that third party person, so that, and obviously it's, a realtor or somebody like that. You've talked a bit about brokers. What the heck is a broker, and what is their role in all of this?
I was hoping you weren't going to bring up brokers, because I have
Uh-oh.
a huge disdain for brokers.
Okay, that's cool.
I-
And
Especially
it's
realtors slash brokers.
uh-huh.
Business brokers are the bane of my existence,
Okay.
because most of them think they're big shots. And
Well, and clearly they're in it to make money. I mean, otherwise they wouldn't be doing it. So, there is kind of that going into it.
yeah, so the whole purpose of they're going to get a portion, they want to maximize the sale of the business.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, so it's their job to convince you to buy it at whatever they're listing it for. But
Right.
when you do your research and you point something out so plainly, and they just want to ignore it for no other reason than they're trying to maximize their profit. And then there are situations, like I've had situations where I've done simple valuation formulas, multiple of earnings, and said this business is not worth what you're saying it's worth. And then the
Mm-hmm.
person walks away from the business and it shuts down, and then the
Right.
broker doesn't get paid. The
Right.
business
Nobody gets
closed. No,
anything.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's always it's been a touchy point
Mm-hmm.
for me. But I deal with so many, because like I said, I'm 1 hour a day looking at businesses for sale. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm always requesting the books at all times. I want to get a pizza shop. That's my kind of like my pet business that I'm
Ooh.
trying to get into.
Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing is, you're doing this because it's a passion for you, and you want to have a pizza shop. So it kind of comes back to the others. You can't let anybody know you really want this business. But it gives you the flexibility to be able to go after the business that you want.
Yeah, when you know what you're looking for, it makes everything very clear. It's by the way, today's National Pizza Day. Um,
Oh,
and so when I first got into it, the reason I looked into the industry that I looked into was because oil changes are a quasi utility.
right.
And I'd say I'm passionate about cars, but I'm more passionate about business than I am cars. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
lucky in the sense that my passion for business, no matter what industry I get into, I'm able to apply my passion towards it. For some
Right.
people, the only way they'll ever succeed in business is if what their business is their passion. Otherwise, they're going to fail, because they're just
Mm-hmm.
not going to, I was up until 2 a.m. last night, and just some people don't have that.
Right. Well, and yeah, for either they don't have the passion, or they just don't have the ability to do that. And but yeah, so it's just so interesting to think of, hey, you want to do this, why not buy an existing business as opposed to starting from scratch?
Yeah, and no one's talking about it. I'm a huge Gary Vaynerchuk fan, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
a huge I'm huge into social media marketing, so I'm very well aware of all the conversations that are going on in entrepreneurship right now, and not a single person is talking about this. And just
Mm-hmm.
statistically speaking, it's just so much more plausible to take over an existing business than it is right now to start one from scratch, or to start an app, or
Right.
to monetize a blog. It's very, like, the numbers are against you in that fashion, but
Mm-hmm.
with an existing business, the infrastructure is there, and if you just figure out how to leverage the situation, you can walk into something really good.
Right. Well, and we've mentioned the fact that if you're buying an existing business, they've got assets, they've got customers, they've got employees, they've got all of those things already in place.
Yes, and all you have to do is add your little personal flair to it to make it your own, and
Mm-hmm.
off you go.
Right. And, you know, and you've made a business of buying multiples, but it could be that somebody just decides, I'm going to buy the pizza shop. You know, I want to be there buying that pizza shop, you know, or landscaping business or whatever it is. It's their passion. And, you know, and so they think, well, hey, you know, I can do this.
Yeah, and that's who I'm trying to get this story out to, and these are the people I'm trying to affect, are the people that, you know, they think it costs a lot of money to start a business or to buy a franchise that's in the industry that they want to be in, or whatever it is. It's not. It really isn't, and a lot of people are very skeptical because it just sounds too good to be true. But if you really look at it, and if you look at it concretely and look at some of the methods in my book, because I don't talk only about seller financing. I know that's the bulk of what we talked about
Right.
today, but
there's crowdsourcing, there's, you know, all sorts of
sweat
different
equity
things.
is one that I'm actually going through right now. There's a quick lube in a suburb of Chicago where the owner is aware of my work ethic, and he reached out to me and he said, hey, you know, if you don't have any money but you want equity in the business, like, if you come help me turn my business around, I see what you've done with other stores, like, I'll give you 50% ownership of the business if you just help
Wow.
me out. Sweat equity is a very good one. And then assume lease purchases. I talk about assume lease purchases. That's another one where the business owner has a situation where they just need to get out, and they say, hey, if you take over this lease, you can have the business.
Right. Well, and, you know, it also could be that, you know, you are already an employee of that business. And so a lot of the information that you've got is very beneficial to those folks also.
Yeah, I'm sure that can be the case as well. I think I would like to think one of my stores, the manager has been there for 20 years. I would like to think that if I were to ever move on, that maybe he would be interested in having it.
Well, and you do talk about employee funding as one of the ways that you can finance this.
Yes, employee funding and vendor funding are two sometimes rare. Vendor financing is common in my industry because the vendor is usually the oil company, and they don't want to see their client go out of business because you're a steady source of revenue.
Right.
You're buying your main, whatever your main item is, your main inventory, whoever your vendor is for that, they have an interest in you being in business. So you can sometimes approach the vendor and say, hey, put up the money for me to take over, and I'll keep using you as our vendor.
Cool. Well, Costa, we've got just a couple minutes left. So what's your favorite part about all of this?
Probably the flexibility of being able to hold myself accountable to myself, and waking up in the morning knowing that I don't have anyone coming down on me for something that I deem irrelevant. I'm the one that gets to deem what is and is not irrelevant. Um, the quality of life change from being self-employed is just so much. It's more than anyone could ever ask for. It's life-changing, which is the whole reason I did this in the first place.
Right. I love it. Well, you know, good golly, we're at the top of the hour, and I've been having so much fun talking with Constantine Kapothanasis about his book, The Zero Down Business, A Guide to Buying an Existing Business with Little to No Money. Obviously, the book is on Amazon, but how else do people find you and connect with you online?
All of my social media is Costa Capo, COSTAKAPO. Any questions at all, or if you want me to look at anything, email me at costa@capogroup.com. That's KAPO group.com. I always connect with people. If you have any questions, if you want me to look at businesses, I'm also starting on my blog to post listings that I feel are candidates for the zero down business. So
cool.
that's something you can look into, and that's just kapothanasis.com, KAPOTHANASIS.com.
Perfect. Well, Costa, this has been fascinating because it really is something that I had never thought of as a way to start a business. And it seems like it's kind of, I hate to say this, a no-brainer. You know, clearly, yes, there's lots of research, there's lots of things, but it is something that business people should be considering, is why start from scratch when you can possibly buy 1, 2, 3 multiple businesses that already exist?
80% of the U.S. economy is businesses of 20 employees or less.
Right.
And we have the largest economy in the entire world. So there's never been a better opportunity for someone to go out and take over someone's business if you just have the ability to find one that suits your needs.
Perfect. Well, Costa, this has been fascinating. I am Deb Krier. I've had a great time talking with you. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Krier. Join us next time for more real-life stories and techniques to power up your business.
She say that she a wanderlust, but she ain't seen the world so much to do at 21. You feel invincible, so hard to find someone to trust. She's still a daddy's girl, she wanna be an actress and a singer like Selena. And she a movie buff, but she ain't seen Breakfast at Tiffany's or Breakfast Club. That's just before her time, so hard to keep a conversation when your mind's on vacation. You got pretty green eyes, I can see them dollar signs, girl.